so let's go ahead and begin. Can you go ahead and just give me a hi, my name is, and your title here at Magic Mountain?
Hi, my name is Tim Burkhart, and I am the Vice President of Maintenance and Construction for Six Flags theme parks.
Go ahead. How did you get in the industry?
I started working here at Magic Mountain when I was in high school, working on the Revolution ride in 1977.
It's changed a little bit.
A lot of things have changed quite a bit, yes.
What have you seen has been the biggest change since your time here in high school?
The biggest change, without a doubt, is the complexity of the rides, the complexity of the equipment, and along with that, the increased attention, complexity, and professionalism of how we operate and maintain the equipment. It's very different now than what it was 40 years ago.
Okay. Do you remember your very first aero ride? And if you do, what was it?
Well, the very first aero ride that I remember working on as a ride operator was the Jetstream flume ride and the Gold Rusher coaster on the backside of the park. Those are all aero rides. But you know, that was as a ride operator. You go up, operate the ride, and do that. The first ride that I really had interaction with aero was when we built the VIPRE.
Why were aero rides, in your opinion, so attractive to people in the industry?
You know, aero just had phenomenal engineering and vision combined. And Ron Toomer, when he started what he did with aero and taking it into that next generation, so to speak, of aerodynamics, really brought a creative, innovative sense of designing rides, and combined that with just his phenomenal engineering ability to pull them off and make them happen.
Why at the time, why was Magic Mountain buying aero rides? Specifically, like, why did they want to buy VIPRE? Why did they buy X?
Well, you know, in those days there were not a whole lot of ride manufacturers that were capable of doing big, exciting, thrilling rides. You only had a small handful, and there was a lot of competition. And among those manufacturers that were out there, the competition was really peaking. In fact, that was when you first started hearing the term coaster wars come into play, and aero was a big part of creating that coaster war I don't know, mentality or time frame, and they were leaders in it. So Magic Mountain went for what we consider to be the most thrilling and best entertainment experience on a ride.
You have a unique experience because not only did you work on the aero rides, you helped build them, and you worked with them on designing them.
Yep.
In more cases, more than you wanted to, probably.
Right.
Did aero feel different from other amusement companies? Why or why not?
They were a little different. Aero was pretty easy to work with. They liked to collaborate with the park. They liked the input, both from a design standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, because we have to keep these things running for many years, and they were real interested in what the field operations had to say in the design as well as the ongoing maintenance of it. They were a good group of guys, both on the design side and on the fabrication side. The people that they used to actually build and fabricate the steel were craftsmen in their own right that were good to work with, that I learned a lot from.
All right, so we're going to talk a bit specifically about some attractions real quick. Why, because this is going to an audience not just of enthusiasts, but to regular people too, why is X behind us so special?
Well, X is special for a lot of reasons. It's special, I think, to the coaster community because it was, in fact, the first of its kind. And it was a huge first. I mean, a lot of rides can claim to be the first to, be over X number of feet tall, the first to go over X miles an hour. But X was the first of a whole brand new genre of ride with the rotating seats, the cantilever setup of the vehicle. The size and the scale of this ride is unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. So I think the public, our guests, the visitors to the park, as well as the coaster enthusiast world, they look at this structure and these vehicles, and they're just taken aback the first time they see it.
What challenges did you have building X?
Well, that's what makes it special to me. X consumed a very large part of my life for a very long time, trying to bring this thing to operation. And not only me, but a lot of other people that I work very closely with. You know, for all of the great design and innovation and engineering that Aero was known for, they had struggles operating as a business, and you have to look at those two as two very separate disciplines. And along with those business struggles, while we were building X, came bankruptcy for Aero. And in the course of that bankruptcy, Aero had not finished fabricating all the steel for this ride. And we were at a point, Six Flags was at a point, where we could not just simply walk away from what we had started. So it was incumbent on me and my team to go in and pick up the pieces that Aero had left and finish the rest of the fabrication, get it all here, get it put up, and operate it. And we did that, and it was one of the most highest of the personal satisfactions I've ever had in this industry, was getting this ride up and running with the team that I had to work with.
Okay. What challenges do you experience maintaining this ride?
These days, not much. These days we have, you know, as everyone knows, we did a complete vehicle redesign several years ago, and the challenge on maintaining this ride had always been the vehicles. This track and column structure is as close to bulletproof of a structure as I've ever seen on a roller coaster, but the vehicles, they left a lot to be desired. They were tremendously over their design weight, and that overweight basically caused them to tear themselves apart, dramatically shortened their useful life, required an incredible amount of inspection to make sure that everything was safe to operate, and in the course of those inspections we found a lot of things that needed a lot of repair. So we decided to completely redesign the train. We brought new trains in that were 20 to 25% under the weight of the older trains. We dealt with all of our wheel issues. We dealt with all of our structural issues on the vehicles. And now, you know, other than the size and you know, just being a big ride, it's really no more difficult to maintain technically than any other coaster.
Okay. Where we go there? Moving on from X2, let's talk about its neighbor. VIPRE, big on the media because everyone seems to think, when they think steel roller coaster, VIPRE seems to come to mind for the most part. You helped build that one as well, I'm assuming?
I was on the team for that. I was at a little bit of a lower level on the team than I am today.
What do you remember about that experience?
I'll tell you the funniest story about this. I was actually the vice president of operations, and the ride was open. And guest relations called me on the phone and said, hey, Michael Eisner is down here and wants to talk to somebody about VIPRE. And of course, Michael Eisner was CEO of Disney at the time. And first I thought they were pulling my leg. And so I went down there, and I'll be darned if Michael Eisner wasn't standing in the lobby of guest relations. So we walked around, talked about the ride a little bit, and he asked me, how long did it take you to build this ride? And I said, it took 88 days. And he said, no, I mean the whole ride, you know. And I said, oh, I'm serious, it took us 88 days to erect the ride and get it up and running. I said, obviously that didn't count for the fabrication and all that, but he looked at me and kind of shook his head, and he said, it would take us more than 88 days to decide what color to paint it. So, you know, I don't say that as a slam against anybody. It's just one of those just stories I'll never forget about the VIPRE project.
Oh man. Okay. Let's move on to Jetstream real quick.
Okay.
It's the last hydroflume, I think, this side of the Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken.
You know, I don't keep that close a track of them anymore, but I know there's not very many of them.
Why do you think there aren't that many of them? Well,
you know, it's one of the original theme park rides. I mean, that Jetstream, you know, dates back to 1972 for Magic Mountain when it opened up. It was an era where every park had a train ride, a carousel, and a flume ride. And the early parks that were built during that time all had one. And over the years, the flume ride, I think, as a guest attraction has fallen a little bit out of favor. It's not a big, exciting ride. You don't see a lot of people building just straight flume rides anymore. While most parks will have one, after 35, 40, 45 years for some of these rides that are just immersed in water all day long, they become very difficult to maintain. The structure corrodes, the wood rots, there's a tremendous amount of structure replacement that has to go on. From a maintenance standpoint, they're high maintenance rides.
But let's talk about why Ninja is so unique as well.
Well, again, Ninja, it wasn't the first suspended coaster, but it was what I would call the first successful suspended coaster. It really, you know, beyond the prototype ride that opened first, a lot of the bugs got worked out of it. And what really made Ninja unique was the way that we were able to wind it into the terrain and the landscape of Magic Mountain. And again, I clearly remember when we were sitting around in the planning stages of that ride, Star Wars, the Star Wars movie where the speeders were chasing the Ewoks through the forest had just come out, and that was exactly what reminded me of the Ninja ride. And you know, in addition to being a coaster geek, I'm also a Star Wars nerd, so I had the you know, the opportunity to just ride that ride and make that connection, and we were able to pull that off through our advertising and our promotion as well. While not directly, I think a lot of people, when they saw our advertising, saw our creative, and came and rode that ride, got off the ride saying, wow, that was just like Star Wars. And I think that was a big part of the popularity of it. That, and it's a fun ride, but it's not an over-the-top thrilling ride that puts people off. For most little kids, that's their very first real coaster. And that's what I tell people. When you've got a little kid that, you know, when he's 42 and 1/8 inches tall, put him on Ninja, because that's the first ride you want to get him on.
A lot of the aero multi-loopers are coming down now. Why?
Well, I think you have to consider that everything you build has a finite life. There's nothing, you know, from a practical standpoint that has an infinite life to it. Although in a lot of our design calculations and a lot of the engineering work, you know, we do design some components for what we call infinite life. But, you know, that doesn't really represent the practical side of maintaining these structures and these rides. So you have a lot of reasons why a lot of the older steel coasters are coming out. One is they become very expensive to maintain. Another is a lot of times the manufacturers that originally built them are no longer around, and it's difficult to get support. It's difficult to get parts made in a lot of circumstances, so you need to have very deep engineering resources to reverse engineer and create new parts. You also get in the situation where the needs of the park, a lot of times the needs of the park come over the obsolescence of the ride, and you say, look, we're spending $500,000 a year maintaining this ride, and nobody rides it anymore. You know, what's it really worth to us? So, you know, we're going to take it out and put in something that somebody really wants. It's usually that is a big part of the equation when you're taking a ride out of a park. You very, very rarely take out a very popular ride because it's obsolete or difficult to maintain.
Next one, why is tubular steel so popular in terms of designing a coaster like this?
Well, tubular steel for a track construction is very easy to work with. You can bend it into almost any shape you want. You've got a lot of flexibility in terms of design flexibility to create the shapes and the runs and the turns and the loops and anything else that you want to do. You really can't bend a square shape very easily or very smoothly. So it really becomes just, you know, a function of the geometry of the material that you're using. So
piggybacking on that, there's a little RMC thing over there.
Had a feeling that's where you were going to go next.
With flat track, though, now making a comeback in terms of steel rides, what do you see the future of tubular? Is it going to disappear? Is it just the next incarnation of the next generation of a steel coaster that's going to be flat track as opposed to tubular?
Well, I think that you are going to see both of those strategies used in rides as we move down the road. Obviously, bending a tubular track is a very cost-effective way of getting what you want out of a track design. Doesn't really work well on a wooden coaster structure because of the underlying structure that you use to support it. That's why the flat track and in particular the Rocky Mountain I-box design works really, really well. And again, you can't really bend a steel I-beam to get the kind of shapes and designs that you need to do the things that we have done, for example, on Twisted Colossus. So all of that I-box is individually welded pieces of steel that create those profiles. And if you were to look at the pieces that were all cut out of a piece of steel and how they are assembled together, I've described it to people as a soccer ball. It's like a soccer ball is a bunch of individual hexagonal shaped pieces that are all sewn together to make a ball. That's how they build the I-box track. It's not cheap, and for example, to replace a tubular structure on a ride like X with an I-box, I don't know what you'd ever accomplish other than spending a lot of money. Yeah, I've been there more than a few times myself, and it's a very impressive operation. And of course, that the guy who works on all of that from a design engineering standpoint, Alan Schilke, is the guy who did the design of X2. And I've known and worked with Alan since we started the X2 project, and he is probably right now one of the upper crust coaster designers in the world. And I personally put him right up there with Stengel and everybody else that ever did a ride.
That's definitely a high compliment. I know he'll appreciate that when we see him at IAPA. Let's go back to the last two. Why do you think, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but just why did Aero fail in your opinion? Why did they not make the grade?
Well, like I said earlier, you really have to separate the engineering, design, and innovative side of the business from the business operations side of the business. And in my view, it was the business side, the business operations that caused the problems, not the design and engineering side. And what led to that and how that happened, I was certainly never privy to those kinds of details of their business side. But judging from my standpoint, judging their innovation, their engineering skills, their reputation, and my experience working with them, that side of the business was strong.
Last question, and then we let you get to go. What do you think, in your own humble opinion, is the legacy of Aero development? What will their ultimate legacy be?
I think that in the heyday, well, let me take it even back a step. Aero was a part of the birth of the theme park business. They were original ride suppliers to Disneyland. They were original ride suppliers to Knott's Berry Farm. They were original ride suppliers to Six Flags and a lot of other parks. So they have been here since the birth of the business. And they ran up and had a phenomenal run of success. They created some of the most successful and best run, best built rides this industry's ever seen. And that right there is the legacy that I think anyone would be proud to claim.